Canada's steel industry is suffering greatly from these 232 tariffs that have been imposed by the United States at 50% now on Canadian steel.
Jobs Minister Patty Hajdu there announcing a $400 million relief loan for tariff-hit Algoma Steel. The Ontario government adding another $100 million for the
5-year horizon for deficits has now doubled under Carney versus what it was under Trudeau. If you don't change, this is done.
Prime Minister Mark Carney opened the week with a dramatic bailout announcement. Ottawa pledged $400 million to Algoma Steel, and Ontario quickly added another $100 million. On paper, it was billed as a rescue. In reality, it was a red flag. Washington's tariffs on steel, aluminum, and shipping have hammered Canada's industrial core. Instead of standing firm or forcing concessions, Carney rushed to pour money into a sector collapsing under Trump's pressure. The message to Canadians was unmistakable. This is not strength. This is surrender financed with borrowed dollars. The so-called rescue was not a strategy. It was a warning that the government is trapped. What followed was even more alarming. Canada's Parliamentary Budget Officer, newly appointed by Carney himself, described the fiscal outlook as shocking, unsustainable. The 5-year deficit horizon has already doubled compared to Trudeau's plan. Carney sold himself as the sober manager who would restore discipline, but the numbers tell a different story. Billions are being thrown into stopgap measures, while shipping volumes have dropped 50 to 60%. Families are paying higher prices, workers are losing hours, yet Ottawa is burning through the public purse to preserve symbols of strength. That spiral is the definition of backfire. Instead of calming markets, it spooked them. Instead of protecting Canadians, it saddled them with mounting debt. And instead of forcing Washington to negotiate, it signaled desperation. The ripple effects are everywhere. Small manufacturers who depend on steel inputs now face both higher costs and lower demand. Ports in Montreal and Halifax report declining cargo, which means fewer shifts for dock workers. Truckers see empty backhauls, and farmers who rely on exports through these routes are also squeezed. The bailout may patch one hole, but it opens 5 others. Each dollar borrowed today drags tomorrow's economy deeper into uncertainty. Yet in politics, perception often lags behind reality. Former NDP leader Tom Mulcair observed that Canadians still see Carney as the one able to stand up to Trump. That paradox cuts to the heart of the crisis. Trump escalates with tariffs. Carney counters with deficit spending. In the theater of politics, that may still look like toughness, but in the economy, it is weakness disguised as courage. Trump has seized the upper hand, dictating terms and watching Ottawa scramble. Carney's image as the safe pair of hands is already cracked, but many voters remain attached to the idea that he is a shield against Washington. That mismatch between perception and performance is what keeps Canada stuck in limbo. The country is bleeding leverage while clinging to the illusion of strength. The road ahead looks darker still. The deficit, already hovering around $60 billion, could easily surge past $70 or even $90 billion before the next budget. Carney promises departments will cut 15% over time, but offers no clear plan. The steel and aluminum lifelines may buy a few months of payroll, yet they cannot reverse a structural collapse. The shipping slowdown is brutal, the investment climate is frozen, and the US tariffs are not going away. Ordinary Canadians are bracing for higher taxes, more layoffs, and relentless inflation that will squeeze families even harder. By 2026, Canada will face the high-stakes review of the USMCA, a negotiation where Ottawa will enter weaker, poorer, and more divided. For Canadians, the reality is unavoidable. Carney's policies are not protecting the economy, they are accelerating its decline. And if this spiral continues, today's bailout will be remembered not as a lifeline, but as the moment the collapse became undeniable.
We're over the shock, but we should never forget the lessons. We have to look out for ourselves.
Both Canada and Mexico want to save North America-wide free trade, but they both know that they can't control what the U.S. does. So there's also an effort to grow bilateral trade between Canada and Mexico, which is still tariff-free.
Prime Minister Mark Carney has been everywhere but home. One week it is Mexico, the next week Europe.
Prime Minister has just arrived in Europe. Mark Carney will spend the next few days meeting with political leaders to discuss securing a ceasefire for Ukraine. He's also shoring up economic alliances in the face of President Donald Trump's trade war.
Always with the same message: Canada can somehow break free from dependence on the United States. Cameras capture him shaking hands in Warsaw, smiling in Berlin, and sitting down in Mexico City with CEOs. To the casual viewer, it might look like leadership. Scratch the surface and you see a prime minister in panic mode, running from crisis to crisis, desperate to prove he has a plan. He talks about corridors, partnerships, frameworks. He collects communiques and photo ops. Diplomacy fills the album. The grocery cart tells a different story. Families are paying more and getting less. If a strategy is measured by outcomes, not slogans, what exactly has changed for Canadians since this whirlwind began? Almost nothing. While Carney hops planes, Canadian households are stuck with the bill. Trump's reciprocal tariffs continue to hit steel, aluminum, autos, and a long tail of inputs that raise costs across the economy. China retaliates on canola and other farm exports, squeezing producers who already face higher fertilizer, equipment, and transport costs. Ottawa's answer was to quietly scrap many retaliatory tariffs on American goods right before the Europe trip. Supporters said it was pragmatic. Critics called it surrender. Either way, import prices are still elevated, supply chains are still disrupted, and exporters are still boxed in by two giants. Carney promised to stand elbows up against Washington. Instead, he folded early and asked Canadians to carry the burden at the checkout line. That is not strategy. That is cost shifting dressed up as diplomacy. Every week that passes, more businesses warn they cannot hold out much longer. The partners Carney pins his hopes on are hardly stable. Europe is distracted. France just watched a government collapse. Britain is wobbling with its own political fractures. These are not pillars ready to rescue Canada from a tariff storm. And Mexico, the other supposed escape hatch, is playing a careful game. Ottawa talks about a bilateral trade corridor and a united front for the 2026 USMCA review. On the ground, Washington is signaling openings for Mexico that Canada does not enjoy. If Mexico gets relief while Canada waits, the North American playing field tilts further. It means capital and supply chains chase certainty south, not north. Meanwhile, Europe wants critical minerals and energy assurances from Canada, but is in no position to shield Ottawa from Trump's tariff architecture. The truth is simple: every partner is negotiating for themselves first. Canada arrives with good intentions and leaves with nice press releases, but no real leverage. Carney's whirlwind diplomacy looks impressive on a map. At home, the cracks are wider. The economy is under pressure, exporters are blocked, and consumers face persistent price pain. The grand plan to outmaneuver Trump has not materialized into leverage. It has backfired into dependency. Canada is stuck between an America that sets the terms and a China that punishes without hesitation. The Prime Minister's answer is more travel, more panels, more statements about working groups and future frameworks. None of that pays the utility bill or rescues a shipment stuck behind a tariff wall. The verdict is clear. After all the rushing around, Canada is exactly where it started, only more tired and more expensive. The world is moving fast. Canada is spinning its wheels. And it is ordinary citizens who are paying for a strategy that confuses motion with progress, while their leader mistakes movement for victory. Frustration is building, and patience is running out. For many Canadians, the question is no longer whether Carney's plan works, it is whether he ever had one in the first place.
If you were to, write a story about the economic impact of the tariffs thus far, what would the headline read?
Well, it's like we talked about last time. We expected investment, there would be a freeze. So what we've got now is two economies actually that are sliding, let's say not in recession probably, but sliding in that direction. The trajectory is not a positive one for both the US and Canada.
The warning signs are flashing red. Mark Carney came into office promising stability, but the backbone of Canada's economy is weakening by the day. Unemployment is climbing, with youth joblessness now running at double the national average. Layoffs have spread from factories to offices, and businesses have stopped hiring for months. Families once told to trust Ottawa's plan are instead staring at help-wanted boards that never get filled. Trump's tariff wall was always going to be a test, yet Carney has failed to shield the country. Instead of a clear strategy, Canadians are left with uncertainty, higher costs, and a government scrambling to explain why the nation is sliding into trouble. Carney insists his answer is massive new spending. Defense contracts, infrastructure schemes, and so-called catalytic investments are all advertised as the silver bullet. He claims that public money will attract private capital, building projects that will drive growth. But the reality is stark. Investment has frozen, companies have cut back, and confidence is evaporating. Ottawa's promises of partnership with business are ringing hollow as firms hold their cash instead of expanding. What Carney calls a shield looks more like a sieve, pouring billions into programs that swell the deficit but fail to deliver jobs. And here lies the deeper contradiction. By separating flashy investment pledges from everyday government spending, Carney pretends that deficits do not matter. Yet Canadians know better. Every dollar borrowed must be repaid, and every promise made without results erodes trust. Instead of spurring private growth, his so-called catalytic model has paralyzed decision-making. Projects stall while interest costs climb, leaving Canada weaker both fiscally and economically. The backfire is undeniable. Spending without results is not a shield, but a liability. For ordinary Canadians, the pain is no longer abstract. Prices are climbing as inflation trickles through the economy. At first, companies swallowed the hit, but now costs are landing squarely on consumers. Families are told to take pride in Buy Canadian campaigns and to stay home for their holidays. But this is not resilience, it is retreat. Retail sales may look stable, yet that stability comes from households giving up foreign trips and cutting back elsewhere. The truth is harsher. Consumer strength is masking a deeper collapse. And while Ottawa points to those numbers as proof of stability, the story on the ground is very different. Parents are cutting meals, students are delaying studies, and young workers are trapped in a shrinking job market. Youth unemployment near 15% is not a statistic, it is a warning siren. A generation that endured the pandemic is now losing faith in the future. Carney's policies have turned the cost of tariffs into a tax on families. Instead of relief, Canadians face the cruel reality that they are paying for both Trump's tariffs and Ottawa's mismanagement. Trump's tariffs were a heavy blow, but they also revealed the measure of Canada's leadership. While Washington imposed its will, Ottawa had a chance to respond with clarity and strength. Instead, Carney offered spending sprees, vague talk of catalytic investment, and rising red ink. The backbone of the economy is weakening because his strategy has failed. What was sold as a shield has backfired into higher debt, fragile growth, and lost confidence. Canadians can already feel it in their wallets and in their job prospects. And unless this government changes course, the damage will only deepen. The warning could not be clearer. Carney's backfire is exposed, and the worst may still lie ahead.
We're starting to see the impact of U.S. President Donald Trump's tariffs as they begin to hit the Canadian economy. The unemployment rate in August ticked up to 7.1%. That's the highest level in 4 years. The Canadian economy shrank by 1.6% in the second quarter of the year. And during that same period, Canada's productivity dropped by 1%, the biggest plunge in 3 years.
The warning signs are impossible to ignore. Trump's tariffs are hammering Canada, and the damage is spilling into every corner of the economy. In August, unemployment jumped to 7.1%, the highest in 4 years. The economy shrank by 1.6% in the second quarter, while productivity suffered its steepest fall in 3 years. For ordinary Canadians, these are not abstract numbers. They mean lost jobs, vanishing savings, and mortgage payments slipping out of reach. Families look to Ottawa for leadership, but instead they see Mark Carney promising stability while delivering chaos. What was supposed to be a plan to shield Canada from American pressure is already collapsing under its own weight. At the heart of the crisis lies Carney's budget gamble. He has tried to sell Canadians on a vision of austerity and investment at the same time, as if the government can cut deeply while spending freely. The contradictions are glaring. Ottawa talks about trimming day-to-day operations, yet still fuels massive new projects that push the deficit toward $100 billion. The problem is not just the size of the shortfall, but the mixed message it sends. Businesses see a government chasing slogans rather than strategy, pledging discipline one moment and opening the taps the next. Private capital is retreating, down 10% in the second quarter, just as the economy needs it most. Even the prospect of lower interest rates from the Bank of Canada cannot restore confidence when fiscal policy looks so unstable. Credit agencies are already warning about Canada's debt trajectory, raising the risk of a downgrade that would make borrowing costlier for everyone. What was meant to project confidence now looks like weakness, and markets are responding accordingly. Now the human cost is mounting. More than 1.5 million Canadians are out of work. The employment insurance program, which should act as a safety net, covers barely a third of the unemployed, the lowest rate since 1941. That failure leaves workers completely exposed. Prime-age employees in once secure industries earning six-figure salaries are suddenly watching their homes slip away. In retail and hospitality, low-wage staff face eviction because 55% of minimum wage is not enough to survive. The pain is spreading far beyond those sectors. Auto plants in Ontario are scaling back shifts, steel mills are idling furnaces, and construction projects are stalling as material costs climb under Trump's tariff wall. Every lost paycheck means another family slipping into uncertainty, and every layoff adds pressure to already stretched food banks and rental markets. Carney's government promised resilience, but the cracks in the social fabric are widening. By failing to strengthen EI, by refusing to prepare for a recession, Ottawa has allowed this crisis to snowball. Instead of cushioning the blow, Carney's policies are amplifying it, turning what could have been a slowdown into a spiral of insecurity. Through it all, Canada's dependence on the United States has only grown clearer. The only lifeline left is CUSMA, keeping trade channels open and investment flowing. But even that is fragile, hanging on the goodwill of a president who has shown no hesitation to rewrite the rules. Trump can reopen the deal at any time, and Carney has no strategy to prevent it. Investors know it. That is why private capital is fleeing, leaving Canada with fewer options and less leverage. The reality is stark. Carney is not guiding Canada through the storm. He is being tossed around by it. Trump dictates the terms, and Ottawa scrambles after every move. Canadians pay the price, with higher unemployment, weaker growth, and a future clouded by doubt. And unless something changes, the worst may still be ahead.